The road to Noorabad wound like a lazy snake through the rolling hills, dust swirling behind the lone bus that crept toward the forgotten village. Samir sat by the window, his face half hidden by the collar of his jacket, watching the world slide past. He hadn't been here in nearly 20 years, not since his father's sudden death, not since the whispers began. Noorabad had never been an ordinary place. Even when he was a child, people spoke in low voices after sunset. They told stories of shadows that followed without footsteps, of voices calling your name when no one was there. His father used to laugh it off, calling them old wives' tales, but Samir remembered how quickly the laughter died in his father's throat when the power would flicker at night. Now, Samir was coming back, not out of choice, but necessity. His uncle, Arif, had passed away a month ago, leaving Samir the last piece of family property, a crumbling ancestral mansion at the edge of the village. The letter from the village council was curt. If Samir didn't come to claim it, the house would be seized. He had no plans to stay. Sell it, take the money, and never return, that was the idea. The bus jolted to a stop at the small square that served as Noorabad's heart. It looked the same, and yet emptier. The tea stall was still there, but the laughter was gone. The market stalls were few, and the faces that turned toward him were older, thinner, with eyes that seemed to weigh him against some invisible memory. A bent old man with a weathered face shuffled forward. "Samir?" he asked, his voice thin. Samir frowned. "Do I know you?" The man's cracked lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "I knew your father. I knew when you left. I knew you'd return." Before Samir could respond, the old man's gaze darted toward the hills beyond the village, where the silhouette of the mansion rose like a jagged scar against the sky. "Be careful," the man murmured. "The house remembers." The mansion was worse than he imagined. Its once grand gates sagged on rusted hinges, the courtyard choked with weeds, and the stone walls were blackened in places, as if touched by fire. He pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The air was thick, stale, and cold, colder than it should have been in late summer. Dust motes floated in the dim light filtering through the cracked windows. The furniture was draped in yellowed sheets, and somewhere deep inside, water dripped in slow, deliberate beats. He wandered through the rooms, memories brushing against him like cobwebs. The library, where his father had spent long evenings. The dining hall, where meals had always felt too quiet after his mother died. The narrow staircase, where Samir froze. From upstairs came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, measured. His chest tightened. "Hello?" No answer. He climbed, the wood groaning under his weight. At the top, the hallway stretched ahead, lined with closed doors. The footsteps had stopped. One door, at the very end, stood slightly open. Samir pushed it gently and stepped inside. It was his father's study, untouched, except for one thing. On the desk lay an envelope, yellowed but clean, as if it had been placed there recently. His name was written across it in his father's handwriting. Hands trembling, Samir opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with 4 words. "Don't trust the shadows." That night, Samir lay on the old bed in one of the upstairs rooms, unable to sleep. The letter burned in his mind. His father had died years before, so how could he have written something that was waiting for Samir now? Wind rattled the shutters. Somewhere downstairs, a door creaked. Then he heard it again. Footsteps. But this time, they weren't slow. They were running. Samir bolted upright, his heart pounding. The steps raced up the stairs, stopped right outside his room. And then silence. He stood, every nerve screaming. Slowly, he reached for the doorknob and twisted. The hallway was empty. But as he turned back toward his bed, his blood turned to ice. A long, dark shadow stretched across the floor, yet there was no one there to cast it. The shadow didn't move. It lay across the floor like a pool of ink, stretching unnaturally long from the corner of the room. Samir's breath caught in his throat. He stepped forward slowly, his eyes locked on it, willing it to make sense. Perhaps it was just the moonlight, some trick of the eye. But there was no moon tonight. The temperature in the room dropped so sharply that his breath misted in the air. The shadow quivered, like ripples in black water, and then began to crawl toward him. Samir stumbled back, his heel hitting the bed frame. "What? What are you?" he whispered. The shadow froze. And then, in a voice that was not a voice, he heard it, inside his head, not in his ears. "You came back just like him." Samir's skin prickled. "Like who?" The shadow seemed to pulse. "Your father." Panic surged through him. He grabbed the nearest object, a brass lamp from the bedside table, and hurled it at the dark patch. The metal clanged against the floor, passing straight through the shadow, as if it were smoke. Samir ran. He tore down the hallway, clattering down the stairs, not daring to look back. The front door was only a few steps away when something slammed it shut from the outside. He was trapped. The old man from the village square, Arif's friend, was suddenly standing in the parlor, his lined face half hidden in darkness. "You saw it," the man said, his voice grim. "Now it won't let you leave." They sat in the cold kitchen, a single candle flickering between them. The old man introduced himself as Rashid. He had served Samir's family for decades, long before Samir was born. "You think your father left this world peacefully?" Rashid asked.
"No."
"The house took him, like it took others before him." Samir's stomach twisted. "Took him?
How?"
Rashid leaned closer. "The mansion was built on cursed ground. Long ago, a man was betrayed here, murdered in the dark by those he trusted. With his dying breath, he swore no one in this house would ever die clean. The curse feeds on regret, on secrets. It twists them into shadows." Samir thought of the strange letter in his father's study. "My father, he warned me about the shadows." Rashid nodded. "He tried to fight them. He failed." The candle sputtered, and for a heartbeat the kitchen was plunged into darkness. When the light steadied again, Samir saw another shadow along the far wall. It wasn't shaped like a man. It was longer, thinner, its edges writhing like smoke. It began to climb the wall toward the ceiling. "Don't look at it too long," Rashid warned, his voice urgent. "It learns your face." Samir tore his eyes away, but the shadow whispered his name in the same not voice as before. They searched the house together, Rashid explaining in hushed tones that the only way to break the curse was to find its root, the object that bound the murdered man's spirit here. "It will be hidden," he said. "Shadows guard it." Hours passed as they pried open cupboards, tore back rotting floorboards, and searched the cellar, but the mansion seemed to rearrange itself, leading them in circles. Then, in the library, Samir noticed something. His father's old desk had deep grooves along one side, marks that didn't belong to its design. He ran his fingers over them, finding a small metal latch. With a click, a hidden compartment sprang open. Inside was a wooden box, blackened with age. The moment Samir touched it, the air grew heavy. Every shadow in the room began to stretch toward him. "Open it," Rashid cried. Samir fumbled with the clasp. Inside lay a rusted dagger, its blade stained black. The shadows surged, slamming into the walls, the ceiling, the floor, screaming without sound. Samir felt the weight of their hatred, the crushing despair of the murdered man. For an instant, he saw flashes in his mind. A candlelit room, a man being stabbed by someone he trusted, the body dragged into darkness. Samir gripped the dagger. "This is it, the root." "Yes," Rashid said. "Destroy it, and you end the curse." But before Samir could move, a shadow lunged from the floor and wrapped around his wrist, ice searing into his skin. "Break me," it hissed, "and you break him." Samir saw another vision, this time of his father. Trapped in darkness, struggling to speak, reaching out for someone he could not see. The truth crashed over him. The curse didn't just kill, it imprisoned souls. His father's spirit was still here, bound by the same shadows that had taken the murdered man centuries ago. Destroying the dagger might set the spirit free, or erase it forever. His hand trembled. "I can't lose him again." Rashid's voice cut through his thoughts. "Samir, if you hesitate, the shadows will take you too." With a roar, Samir hurled the dagger into the fireplace. The old wood erupted in flames, and the shadows shrieked, long, piercing wails that made the walls tremble. They writhed, twisting violently, then tore themselves apart into smoke that dissolved into nothing. The house seemed to exhale. The cold lifted. In the fading light of the fire, Samir thought he saw a figure standing at the top of the stairs, his father, smiling faintly. And then he was gone. By dawn, the mansion felt empty in a way it never had before. Not hollow, but clean, like something had finally been washed away. Samir stepped outside, the sunlight warm on his face. Rashid stood by the gate. "It's over," he said simply. Samir glanced back at the house. "Maybe. But I'm not selling it. Some places need a keeper." As he walked down the path, he didn't see the last sliver of darkness slip beneath the foundation stones. Because some shadows never truly die.